The morning rain tapped against the glass windows of downtown's most exclusive café, creating a rhythmic symphony that seemed to whisper secrets to those who knew how to listen. Sarah Mitchell sat alone at table 7, her fingers wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee that had long since grown cold. At 32, she was already the youngest CEO in the city's history, having built her tech empire from nothing more than a laptop and a dream in her college dorm room. But today, success felt hollow. The quarterly reports scattered across her table told a story of unprecedented growth, yet her heart carried the weight of something far heavier than numbers. Her company, Nexus Innovations, employed thousands, but Sarah had never felt more alone. The rain outside seemed to mirror the storm brewing within her chest. She glanced at her phone. 7 missed calls from her assistant, 12 unread emails marked urgent, and a calendar packed tighter than rush hour traffic. This was supposed to be her moment of triumph. The biggest deal in her company's history was set to close tomorrow, a merger that would catapult Nexus into the Fortune 500. Yet here she sat, staring into the depths of her untouched coffee, wondering if any of it mattered. The cafe buzzed with its usual morning crowd. Young professionals clutched their phones like lifelines. Elderly couples shared quiet conversations over pastries, and college students hunched over laptops with the intensity of surgeons. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged, except Sarah. She had everything she'd ever wanted. So why did she feel like she was drowning in her own success? Her thoughts were interrupted by a gentle commotion near the entrance. A man had entered, his clothes soaked from the rain, his silver hair plastered against his forehead. He moved with the careful steps of someone who couldn't see the world around him, his white cane tapping a familiar rhythm against the cafe floor. Sarah watched as he navigated toward the counter, his movements deliberate but uncertain in the unfamiliar space. The morning rush showed no signs of slowing. Customers jostled past him, their minds focused on their own destinations, their own problems. Sarah observed from her corner table as the man reached the counter, his fingers searching for the edge to orient himself. The barista, a young woman with purple hair and tired eyes, barely looked up from the espresso machine. "What can I get you?" she asked, her voice carrying the mechanical politeness of someone who'd already served 100 customers that morning. "Just a simple coffee, please," the man replied, his voice warm despite the uncertainty in his posture. "Black, no sugar." Sarah found herself leaning forward, something about the man's presence drawing her attention away from her own troubles. There was a dignity in the way he stood, a quiet strength that seemed to fill the space around him. His clothes were well-tailored but not flashy, his posture straight despite the challenges he faced. As he reached into his jacket pocket for his wallet, Sarah noticed the slight tremor in his hands. Not from age or illness, but from the vulnerability that comes with navigating a world designed for others. He fumbled for a moment, his fingers searching the familiar folds of his jacket. Then his expression changed. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I seem to have left my wallet at home." The barista's expression hardened. "Look, sir, I can't just give away free coffee. If you don't have money, you'll need to leave." A hush fell over the immediate area. Several customers turned to look, their faces showing a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Sarah felt her chest tighten as she watched the man's shoulders slump slightly. The dignity she'd admired just moments before beginning to crack under the weight of public embarrassment. "I understand," he said quietly. "I'm sorry to have bothered you." That's when Sarah stood. She didn't think about it, didn't weigh the pros and cons like she would with a business decision. Something deeper than logic propelled her forward, past the tables of strangers, past the voices in her head that whispered about appearances and reputations. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the uncomfortable silence. The barista looked up, surprised by the interruption. Sarah pulled a $20 bill from her wallet and placed it firmly on the counter. "His coffee is on me, and make it a large." The man turned toward her voice, his unseeing eyes somehow finding her face. "That's very kind, but you don't need to—" "I want to," Sarah interrupted gently. "Really?" The barista, suddenly aware that other customers were watching, quickly poured the coffee. Sarah noticed how the man's hand steadied as he accepted the cup, how his posture straightened once again. "Thank you," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that seemed to chase away the morning's chill. "I'm Robert." "Sarah," she replied, surprised by how natural it felt to introduce herself without her title, without the armor of her professional identity. "Well, Sarah, your kindness means more than you know. May I ask what you do?" Sarah hesitated. In her world, this question was always loaded with expectations, networking opportunities, and unspoken calculations. But looking at Robert, she realized he was simply asking because he wanted to know her as a person. "I work in technology," she said simply. Robert nodded, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Ah, the future. I've always been fascinated by how technology changes the way we connect with each other. Sometimes I think we're more connected than ever, and yet—" "More isolated than ever," Sarah finished, the words escaping before she could stop them. "Exactly." Robert's smile widened. "You understand." They stood there for a moment, two strangers connected by an unexpected thread of understanding. Around them, the café continued its morning dance, but Sarah felt as though she'd stepped into a pocket of stillness, a place where the constant noise of her life couldn't reach. "Would you like to sit down?" Sarah asked, gesturing toward her table. "I mean, if you have time." Robert tilted his head, considering. "I'd like that, very much." As they made their way to her table, Sarah quickly gathered her reports and laptop, shoving them into her bag. For the first time in months, work could wait. Robert settled into the chair across from her, his hands wrapped around the warm cup like it was a precious gift. "You know," he said, "I've been coming to this part of the city for years, but I've never stopped in this cafe before. Funny how life works." Sarah studied his face, noting the lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and sorrow, the way his silver hair caught the light from the window. "What brings you here?" "I have a doctor's appointment nearby," Robert explained. "Nothing serious, just routine. But I like to arrive early. Take a walk. Feel the pulse of the city. You learn a lot about a place when you can't see it with your eyes." "What do you mean?" Robert leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. "When you can't rely on sight, you notice other things. The way people's footsteps change when they're in a hurry versus when they're content. The sound of genuine laughter versus polite laughter. The difference between a voice that's trying to impress and one that's simply being honest. Sarah felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "And what do you hear in my voice?" "Sadness," Robert said without hesitation, "and loneliness, but also strength and something else. Kindness that hasn't been worn down by the world yet." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She'd spent years building walls around herself, perfecting the art of appearing confident and in control. Yet this stranger had seen through all of it in a matter of minutes. "I'm sorry," Robert said quickly, perhaps sensing her discomfort. "I didn't mean to—" "No," Sarah interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're right. I am lonely. I've never admitted it out loud before." Robert nodded slowly. "Success can be the loneliest place in the world. I should know." Something in his tone made Sarah look at him more closely. The quality of his clothes, the way he carried himself, the careful way he spoke about success. There was more to Robert than met the eye. "What did you do?" she asked. "Before you retired, I mean." Robert was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "I built things. Companies, mostly. I was good at it, but I was also good at forgetting what really mattered." "What changed?" "I lost something precious," Robert said simply. "My sight, yes, but that wasn't the worst part. I lost my way. I spent so many years chasing the next deal, the next milestone, that I forgot to look around and see what I already had." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. "How did you find your way back?" "I learned to see differently, to value different things, to understand that the most important connections we make aren't about what we can gain from each other, but about what we can give." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of his words settling between them. Sarah realized she'd learned more about herself in the past 20 minutes than she had in the past 20 years. "I should probably get going," Robert said eventually, though he made no move to stand. "My appointment is in an hour." "Of course," Sarah replied, though she found herself reluctant to let this moment end. "It was really wonderful meeting you, Robert." "Likewise, Sarah. Thank you again for the coffee and for the conversation. It's been a long time since I've met someone who understands." As Robert stood to leave, Sarah felt a sudden urgency. "Wait," she said, reaching into her bag. "Here's my card. If you ever want to talk again, or if you need anything—" Robert accepted the card, his fingers running over the embossed text. Sarah watched his expression change as he traced the letters, his touch reading what his eyes could not. "Sarah Mitchell," he said slowly, "CEO, Nexus Innovations. You've heard of it?" Robert's smile was enigmatic. "I've heard of you, Sarah. Your company's work in accessibility technology has been remarkable. The voice recognition software you developed has changed countless lives." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. She'd been so focused on profit margins and market share that she'd almost forgotten the human impact of her work. "That means a lot to hear." "I mean it," Robert said, tucking the card into his jacket pocket. "The world needs more people like you. People who remember that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around." As Robert made his way toward the door, his cane tapping its familiar rhythm, Sarah felt something shift inside her. The reports in her bag, the meetings on her calendar, the merger that had seemed so important an hour ago, they all seemed different now. Not unimportant, but properly prioritized. She watched through the window as Robert walked down the street, his steps confident despite the obstacles he faced. There was something about him, something that made her believe their paths would cross again. Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found her assistant's number. "Jennifer, it's Sarah. I need you to reschedule my morning meetings. Something's come up." "Everything okay?" Jennifer asked, concern evident in her voice. Sarah looked out at the rain, which had softened to a gentle mist. For the first time in months, she felt something that had been missing from her life. Hope. "Everything's perfect," she said. "I just remembered something important." As she gathered her things and prepared to leave the cafe, Sarah realized that sometimes the most profound encounters come disguised as simple acts of kindness. She'd thought she was helping a stranger, but Robert had given her something far more valuable, a reminder of who she wanted to be. The rain had stopped by the time she stepped outside, and the world seemed brighter somehow. Sarah walked toward her office with a lighter step, her mind already working on ideas that had nothing to do with profit margins and everything to do with purpose. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change in ways she never could have imagined. And it all started with a cup of coffee and a man who taught her that the most important things in life can't be seen with our eyes, but must be felt with our hearts. The story was just beginning. This story touched my heart deeply, and I know it will touch yours too. Sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the simplest act of kindness. And what happened between Rachel and Caleb proves that true connection isn't about wealth or status, but about seeing someone's heart when the world overlooks them. Their journey reminds us that love doesn't always announce itself with grand gestures. Sometimes it whispers through quiet moments, patient understanding, and the courage to believe in someone when they can't believe in themselves. If this story moved you the way it moved me, please like, share, and subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories for more tales that celebrate the power of human kindness and the magic that happens when two hearts recognize each other.